The sun was a dying ember, bleeding red across the Arizona horizon, and I was lost, hopelessly, terrifyingly lost. My phone had been dead for hours, its screen a useless black mirror mocking my stupidity for hiking alone without a map. Panic clawed at my chest as the desert stretched endlessly around me, a maze of cacti and silence that swallowed my shouts for help. My name is Elias Harper, a 28-year-old graphic designer from Seattle who thought a solo trip to the Sonoran Desert would recharge his soul. What a cliché. I'd seen too many Instagram posts of sunsets and saguaros, and in my arrogance, I'd wandered off the trail, chasing a perfect photo. Now, with night creeping in and no water left, I was regretting every decision that led me here. The air was cooling fast, and the distant howl of a coyote sent a shiver down my spine. I sank to my knees, the sand gritty against my palms, and whispered a prayer to no one in particular. That's when I heard it, the low, rhythmic clop of hooves. I squinted into the fading light and saw him, a lone figure on horseback, silhouetted against the fiery sky. He rode closer, his horse's steps deliberate, and I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. Was this rescue or trouble? In the desert, you never know. Lost, huh? His voice was warm, gravelly, with a faint drawl that felt like it belonged to the land itself. He dismounted, his boots kicking up dust, and tipped back his cowboy hat. Caleb Monroe, 32, was all lean muscle and sun-weathered skin, his dark eyes sharp but kind. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced the desert's wrath and come out unscathed. Name's Caleb. You got a name? Or you just gonna stare at me like I'm a mirage? Elias? I managed, my throat dry. I got turned around. Phone's dead. No water. He studied me, his gaze lingering a moment too long, and I felt a flush that had nothing to do with the heat. Well, Elias, he said, tossing me a canteen from his saddlebag. You're lucky I was out checking fences. Drink slow. Let's get you somewhere safe before the stars take over. I sipped the water, cool and miraculous, as Caleb tethered his horse, a sturdy bay named Juniper. He didn't ask questions, just motioned for me to follow him toward a small campfire flickering in the distance. My legs wobbled, but his steady presence anchored me. We walked in silence, the desert's vastness pressing in, and I wondered who this man was. A cowboy in 2025, living like he'd stepped out of a western. There was something magnetic about him, something that made my pulse race in a way I hadn't felt in years. At the campsite, Caleb built up the fire with practiced ease, the flames casting shadows across his face. He offered me a blanket and a protein bar from his pack, and I sat on a flat rock, grateful for the warmth. You do this often? I asked, trying to break the silence. Rescue idiots like me? He chuckled, a low rumble that felt like it could shake the stars. Not often. Most folks stick to the trails. You're a rare breed, Elias. His eyes met mine across the fire, and I swear the air thickened. I looked away, suddenly aware of how close we were, how the desert had stripped away the noise of the world and left just us. We talked as the night deepened. I told him about Seattle, my art, my ex who'd left me for a better option 6 months ago. Caleb listened, really listened, his gaze never wavering. In return, he shared fragments of his life. A childhood on a ranch in Wyoming, a move to Arizona after a falling out with his family, a life carved out alone under these endless skies. Folks don't get it, he said, staring into the fire. They see the hat, the horse, and think I'm playing a part. But this is me. Always has been. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his voice, raw, unguarded, stopped me. Instead, I said, "You're not what I expected out here." He raised an eyebrow, and I fumbled, "I mean, you're real, not some cowboy stereotype." He smirked, leaning back against a rock. "And you're not just some city boy lost in the sand. You've got a story, Elias. I can see it in your eyes." The fire crackled, and the space between us felt charged, like the air before a storm. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly our hands brushed as we reached for the same piece of firewood. His fingers lingered, rough and warm, and my breath caught. Neither of us pulled away. The night stretched on, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. Caleb told me about the stars, pointing out constellations with names I'd never heard. Orion's Belt, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades. His voice was a steady rhythm, grounding me in this wild, unfamiliar place. I found myself leaning closer, drawn to his warmth, his quiet strength. "You ever feel like you don't belong anywhere?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Every damn day. But out here it's just me and the land. No one to judge, no one to disappoint." I swallowed, my heart thudding. "Must be lonely, though." "Sometimes." His voice softened. "But then someone like you stumbles into my desert, and suddenly it ain't so lonely." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was tight with emotions I hadn't named in years. I'd spent so long guarding myself, hiding who I was after my ex tore my confidence to shreds. But here, with Caleb, I felt seen. Not just as Elias the screw-up, but as Elias the man, raw and real. We sat in silence, the fire's glow painting his face in soft golds and shadows. Then, without warning, he reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. His touch was gentle but sure, like he'd made up his mind about something. "Elias," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to be lost anymore." My heart stopped, then raced. I leaned into his touch, my eyes locked on his, and in that moment, the desert didn't feel vast or empty. It felt like home. Our lips met, tentative at first, then hungry, a collision of need and longing that burned hotter than the fire. His hands tangled in my hair, and I clung to him, the world narrowing to the taste of him, the feel of his heartbeat against mine. When we pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "Stay the night," he whispered. "Just stay." I nodded, unable to speak, and we curled up together under the blanket. The stars our only witnesses. The desert was silent, but my heart was loud, pounding with a truth I hadn't faced in years. I was falling hard, for a cowboy who'd found me when I was lost in every way. The morning sun woke us, its light harsh and unforgiving. Caleb was already up, tending to Juniper, his movements sure and practiced. I watched him, my chest tight with a mix of awe and fear. Last night had been real, too real, and now I had to face what it meant. I was a city boy with a life back in Seattle, a job, an apartment, a world that didn't include cowboys or deserts. But Caleb, he was something else entirely. "You okay?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. His hat was back on, shielding his eyes, but I could feel his gaze, searching. "Yeah," I lied, sitting up and brushing sand from my clothes. "Just processing." He nodded like he understood more than I was saying. Desert does that. Strips you down, makes you face things. We packed up the campsite in silence, the weight of last night lingering. I wanted to ask him what this was, what we were, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I helped him saddle Juniper, our hands brushing again, sparking memories of the night before. He caught my eye and smiled, a small, private thing that made my heart ache. "Come on," he said, swinging onto the horse and offering me a hand. "I'll get you back to civilization." I took his hand, climbing up behind him, my arms wrapping around his waist. The ride was slow, the desert unfolding around us, and I pressed my cheek against his back, breathing him in leather, dust, and something uniquely Caleb. I didn't want this to end, but the trailhead was getting closer, and with it, reality. When we reached the ranger station, my car was still there, a dusty reminder of my life before. Caleb dismounted, helping me down, his hands lingering on my hips. "You got a phone number, city boy?" he asked, his voice teasing but soft. I laughed, shaky, and scribbled my number on a scrap of paper from my wallet. "Don't lose it," I said, handing it to him. He tucked it into his pocket, his fingers brushing mine. "I don't lose things that matter," he said, and my heart stuttered. We stood there, the desert stretching out behind us, and I knew this was a crossroads. I could drive away, back to my safe, predictable life, or I could take a chance on something wild, something real. Caleb's eyes held mine, steady and sure, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't lost. Back in Seattle, the city felt wrong. Too loud, too crowded, too gray. I went through the motions: work, coffee, sleep, repeat. But every night, I'd lie awake, thinking of Caleb, of the desert, of the way his touch had set me free. My phone stayed silent, and doubt crept in. Had I imagined the connection? Was it just a fleeting moment, a desert mirage? Then, 2 weeks later, it rang. An unknown number. My heart leapt as I answered, and there was his voice, that warm, gravelly drawl. "Elias," he said, "you ever think about coming back to the desert?" I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. "Every damn day." We talked for hours, about nothing and everything, and by the end, I'd booked a flight to Arizona. Caleb met me at the airport, his hat tilted back, his smile wide and real. We didn't say much, just drove out to the desert, to the same spot where he'd found me. Under the stars, we kissed again, and I knew this was where I belonged. Not lost, but found, in the arms of a cowboy who'd seen me when I couldn't see myself. The desert had taken me apart, but Caleb had put me back together. And as we lay together, the night stretching out before us, I realized something. Love doesn't just find you. It fights for you, against all odds, in the wild, endless heart of the desert.